Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back in War Thunder and we have another devblog, and this is for the Emden Light Cruiser. Now remember, the ship's beta is coming out after update 1.79, and the way it was at least listed was that the beta would come along maybe a few weeks or so after update 1.79. I'm not exactly sure why, but this is the closed beta. In order to access it, you need to either have one of the PT boats, packs, or you need one of the destroyer packs. There are two destroyer packs available, one for Germany, one for the USA, and the beta itself has only got the USA and Germany in it, which is unfortunate, but it is how it is. This devblog is focusing around the Emden Light Cruiser, and this is the German ship which is going to be the highest rank, it seems, or at least according to the devblog. On top of that, we're also getting the best version of the Emden. If you want a quick history lesson on the Emden, it was made in 1926, I believe. I'll just check that. It was laid down in 1921, then launched in 1925, commissioned in late 25, and it was technically sunk in 1945. By sunk, it was scuttled by its crew on the 3rd of May, when Germany were obviously losing the war. The crew could not get it repaired enough, so they just decided to leave it where it was and then just move on. So it had a decent service life, and the one that we're getting in the game is the 1945 version, so it's technically the best version that it should be. Now, a little bit more history on top of it. It was used to mine in the North Sea around Norway. It was also used in the Eastern campaign that Germany had to evacuate troops from parts of Eastern Europe back to Germany, or at least around Germany. And it was also used, it was damaged a few times. One of them, a Blenheim bomber, actually crashed into the hull of this thing and killed, I believe, 9 or 15 crew. I believe it was 9 crew, but that meant it needed to be it needed to be repaired. On top of this, it did engage a few battles in the later part of the war, and the main reason why it was scuttled was because it was heavily damaged. So it wasn't just, they ran out of fuel or there was no reason to do it. It was pretty obvious that this thing was done because Germany didn't have the resources to repair it, and the crew probably didn't have the will to do it either. So the three main selling points that they're going for is the 8 150mm, so this is the main cannons that you have on the machine. It has a huge crew, so I'm guessing it's going to be hard to knock out the whole crew, and also the armor belt. Now the armor belt is the interesting one, meaning that HE shells may have a little bit of an issue, so you might have to change to what I'm guessing most people are going to use, which is kind of an AP-HE, APC-BC, or AP shells just to penetrate ships. One thing about the closed beta test that is coming, it is going to be interesting to see which shells are dominant. When we look at ground forces, there is definitely an array of shells which are slightly, dominant over the other ones, but most of the shells, or at least for a lot of machines, they are at least viable in some way, but there is always a best shell in every circumstance. I wonder if that's going to be the same for ships, or if one shell is just going to dominate everything in its entirety. Also, I was thinking the other day, one of the key things about aircraft and also tanks is the research or modification grind that we have in tanks and aircraft. And I was wondering how this would be with ships. We haven't really seen any pictures of when it comes to like modification windows, if you know what I mean, where for tanks this is like tracks, parts, horizontal drive, and then FPE, stuff like that. We haven't seen that for ships, and I feel like since there are a lot of new mechanics for ships, whether it be the automatic guns on it, which are much more powerful than, let's say, a turret on a bomber, when we look at the FPE that's working, the parts, the fact that you can fix the machine so it doesn't sink, I don't know, you could have accuracy of torpedoes, accuracy of guns over range, obviously engine upgrades, maybe extra crew, all of these things, and I'm wondering how much of an effect they're going to have on ships, because in tanks right now, especially at the higher tiers, they make a lot of difference, and that to me is worrying when I look at something like this light cruiser. Like, is it going to take me 50 matches to be able to be combat effective, or at least in a decent, setting? Because in a ship, you're going to take damage, at least compared to a tank. You can hide a tank. You can't really hide a ship on the open water, especially the size of a light cruiser. What is also interesting is when we go down. In War Thunder, we present the 1945 version of the Emden. The German light cruiser is the most powerful Kriegsmarine ship in War Thunder as of the start of the closed beta naval test. So this is your top tier machine. But when we go to here, which is the preliminary patch notes, now understand these were taken down the other day, so obviously they're subject to change, and I'm guessing they are changing it a lot as we speak. One of the interesting things is that it says Emden 1926 there. So we're getting the 45 version in the game, but it's labeled the 26. Now, does that mean that we're going to have two Emdens of different years? So one will be less powerful than the other? Or is it just the fact that it's named differently because it's named after the year that it was put in? Then again, the S100, 44-45, the T22 type 1939, it's going to be interesting to contrast between if we're talking about year launched or year put into service and year that they're taking. I would prefer it if they labeled them as the year that we are taking them from the battlefield, so it's easier to do research and stuff like that, but it's really up to them. And if we are getting two Emdens, which I would be kind of surprised by, then I suppose at least it pads the tech tree and you get two light cruisers to play with, which will be fun to do. So that is just something to mention. If we look at the overall armament of this thing, you're looking at 8 150s, 3 105s, 2 37s, 20 20mm, and 4 500mm torpedoes, and 120 mines. Now, it's going to be interesting to see if we get mines in-game. I believe there are definitely stuff in there when it comes to the mining mechanics. Like, I mean, we have stuff which is very similar. I can't remember the name right now, but basically the satchel charges. I know that's the wrong name for them. The barrels which explode in the water. But we haven't really had any mention of mines properly coming to the game. Like, I know there are some areas of the code which suggests that some kind of mining system could be used, but I don't think it'll be given to the light cruiser as a mechanic that only it can use. One of the also things is, if we have a look at this here, I believe it's talking about when it was either commissioned or when it was not the 1945 version. Because according to Gaijin, we have 8 150s, 3 105s, and then the anti-armament comprises over 20 20mm and also 40mm guns. So we're getting a increased amount of AA cover compared to what it was earlier on. So in 1945, they really boosted the amount of anti-aircraft on this. So we have 3 105s, over 20 20mm, and also 40mm. So this is going to annihilate anything that it can get guns on. Now the question is, will it be able to get guns on? Because a lot of these ships are quite slow when it comes to their turret traverse on all of their guns. So that is where the aircraft come in and are able to try and get there. If I was to hazard a guess, I bet you any money there'll be a modification that will make stuff like turrets increase in how quickly they move. And then that is when aircraft will really struggle in situations like this. But if they don't have that modification, the turret should be quite slow, and it shouldn't be too bad. It's really up to Gaijin on this one, because when I ever played the alpha test, it was very obvious that if the ship's commander was paying attention, no aircraft was getting anywhere near his machine. And even if he just put the AI so it just looked at air, then people would still never get near his machine. So it's going to be interesting to see how stuff like crew skills play a part, and also modifications in that sense. Are we going to have different shells for AA? Like, will the default shell not be very good, and then as you move along, the upgraded shell will be just ridiculous and annihilate everyone? Will one torpedo sink a ship like this? Will PT boats be able to stand up against this? How about destroyers? All of these things. There is a lot going on here, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all works, because the objectives that you can take in a machine like this are completely different to an objective you can take in, let's say, a light destroyer or a PT boat. So even in map design, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. There's a lot of moving parts here, and I'm really interested when it comes out. I find it very hard to speculate on how a ship like this is going to do. I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, it's got 50mm belt armor, it's got a ton of guns on it, it's going to annihilate anything that it touches, but we don't know the light cruiser from the US side. And I'm sure it's here somewhere, I just don't know about it. Like, it's probably the Trenton, right? The Trenton, let's go Trenton CL11. This is the Omaha class light cruiser. So we're just doing some preliminary stuff here. So it has 2 twin 150s, 8 single 6 inches, armor 3 inches, deck is 102. So yeah, this is probably what it's going to go up against, the Trenton. So we'll see this devblog in a few days. It's an Omaha class light cruiser. Oh, by the way, this was the only one of its kind built, by the way, in history. Like, there was only one of these Emden light cruisers, and this was the one, which is why it doesn't have a specific name behind it. But yeah, it's very hard for me to tell how matchups are going to work in light cruisers, and if they're even going to face stuff like destroyers and PT boats, because we don't know the BRs. So it will be much easier for me once we get confirmation on either tech trees, BRs of these machines, what they're going to go up against, how the maps are going to fit around them, all of these wonderful things. Because on the dev servers, well, we just didn't see any of that. It wasn't available. But anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.